Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Exclusive new data has revealed the sheer scale of wealth inequality in the UK, with London being the richest and most unequal city in Britain.
According to research from the Office for National Statistics, property wealth in the capital exceeds £1 trillion, a twelfth of the total wealth of the whole country. Well, our correspondent Adam Parsons has this special report.
This is the story of the nation's wealth. About where money is, who's got it, and how money shapes our society. About the spectrum between the extremes of great wealth and grinding poverty. It's about what we mean by wealth. And it all starts with this man.
Break me, you can never break me. You can roll your weighted dice. But
Alfie is eloquent, thoughtful, and unemployed.
The knowledge that I seek is worth more than you can pay me. You better make your amends while you're here and while you can. When
a rapper waiting to be discovered.
I'm not a alcoholic, I'm not a homeless bum. Some people think they're better, but I live with them the scum. They hide behind the money, looking down and making fun. But greed is for the devil, so you better make her run.
He lives in Jaywick on the Essex coast. This is an area with a shadow. It includes the most deprived neighbourhood in England.
We're walking along here, gorgeous beach.
Yep, lovely, isn't it?
And yet this place is the officially number one most deprived area of the country.
That's why I love coming up the beach. Because when you're up here, you would not even imagine what's over there. You know, it's not very nice down there, but people have to live there because it's cheap.
In your music, in your raps, in your lyrics,
yeah,
I get the impression you're almost a bit unhappy about the way money changes people's lives.
If you come from a background where you've already got that, it's an easier start in life. Yeah. There's a lot of people who haven't got nothing. But I mean, Jaywick on the whole, there's not really any jobs here, is there?
Unemployment is chronic in Jaywick. There's been no big employer here since Butlins moved out of nearby Clacton 35 years ago. For Alfie, and perhaps for many of us, the question of where you find Britain's wealth can be confusing.
I know you need money to live, and it's a construct that's, thinking about, as I say, in the world there's plentiful, there's people starving and things like that. Even in this country there's people starving, but I can't get my head around that. I don't want to be rich. That's not what I'm after. I just want to be comfy, happy.
Down the road, the Brooklands estate, the most deprived place in the nation's most deprived neighbourhood. A grid of narrow, grubby streets with unemployment, illness and crime. In this story of British wealth, we've come to a place that probably has less than anywhere else. Lynn!
Hello!
How are you?
Fine, come in.
Thank you very much indeed. This is Lynn and Ted, who've lived tough lives and now battle illness.
This place we've been here for 6 years.
6 years.
In this place.
You like it?
Yeah.
They moved to Jaywick because a doctor told them the sea air would help Lynn. They've got no savings and no income. Like many people here, they are dependent upon benefits.
In a given week, how much do you spend on food for yourselves?
When we were struggling, we were spending about £10 on food ourselves.
For 2 people for a week?
Yeah.
How much money at the end of a month would you have left over for savings or for going out?
Nothing.
Nothing at all?
No. We haven't been out. The last time we actually went out anywhere was May of last year.
What did you do?
We went over to Colchester.
I don't go out clubbing, I don't go out drinking, I don't take drugs apart from what I'm prescribed, yeah, and we don't go out to eat at restaurants, for argument's sake, yeah. We don't go to the fish and chip shop and buy food. I'm in debt myself for about £5,000.
How stressful, though, is that? A £5,000 debt is...
It's nothing, it's a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, it's a drop in the ocean, darling, but it's...
To most.
To most, but to us...
But to us, it's been quite...
It's a fortune.
Yes, it is to us, yeah. It has been stressful, and at times, and I know I shouldn't admit this, but at times it's made me cry. Yeah, I'm not an emotional woman, but at times I've sat here, and Ted can verify,
Yeah.
I've sat here and cried because I can't...
We both have.
I can't stretch it as far as I need to stretch it. But then again, we look at it this way, you've just got to make do where you can, yeah?
There's a strong community spirit here, but there are also some very vulnerable people. There's poverty and complex social needs. These are the most deprived streets in England, but you still get lots of people who want to come here. And why? Well, probably because property is so cheap. You can buy a house in this area for below £50,000, and that's less than just about anywhere else in the UK. It means even if you're surviving on a pretty meagre income, you still have a relatively affordable cost of living. And that balance between money coming in and money going out is crucial to the way we judge wealth across the United Kingdom.
Jaywick is not that far from the UK's richest regions, London and the South East. We can gauge inequality using a formula called the Gini coefficient. The higher the bar, the worse the inequality. The most equal region is the southwest of England, followed by the east of England and the West Midlands. Worst of all is London. So, next stop, the nation's capital. The capital has a greater proportion of rich and poor people than anywhere else in the UK. Households here own property worth more than £1 trillion. And the riches of London have flowed into the home counties. On average, households in South East England, a region that excludes the capital, are even richer than those in London. Here on the Thames we found Simon and Sam, regular musicians at a bar where you can sing karaoke along with a ukulele band. It's all great fun until someone mentions the cost of living.
Up until quite recently I was borrowing money out of my sister's student loan, so money could be better. The price of living is very high. Even though the wages you get paid will be higher, the price of living is so much higher than anywhere else that it's not equal in that sense, no.
And what about London's sky-high property costs?
I have a one-bed flat in a very poor area, not even like a middle suburban house. But to a lot of people, when they hear I own a property, you're wealthy because you own a property, and that's something that's changed, I think. I fantasize about just having a garden, which is like ridiculous, but because I can only have a flat, not a house, a garden has become this symbol of luxury.
So here's a picture of British wealth. Pensioners in the South East and London regions make up our wealthiest households. The worst off sector, single-parent households in Wales and, yes, also in London. If we factor in deprivation, yellow areas are well off, the purple ones have more social problems, and you can see the South is generally richer than the North. There are enormous exceptions, the poverty in Jaywick, and also, well, this. Welcome to Congleton Road in Alderley Edge, the most expensive, lavish road in the north of England. In this corner of Cheshire, just 15 miles from Manchester, homes sell for millions. It demonstrates another British trend. Well-heeled people wanting to live near one another. So you sell tickets for this, I'm assuming?
Yeah. There's a lot that goes into this event. Lots of champagne. Bringing glamour back to Cheshire is what I would like to do.
Joanna organises glamorous events for the rich and famous.
It's a very affluent area to live. I think it's a beautiful place to live. I feel there's a lot of entrepreneurs, there's a lot of business people, especially women, but we're no different to anyone else, just normal people.
There must be something different though, because normal people don't end up with Bentleys and, I don't know, million-pound homes.
Well, again, it's the entrepreneur in them then, isn't it?
What would it take then for you to consider yourself financially wealthy?
It's when I've got my Aston Martin, so...
That's it?
Yeah.
That's when you get across the line?
I think so.
We sort of do monthly networking groups in the area.
Little surprise then that Joanna is planning an event in collaboration with her favourite brand. In this slice of Cheshire, Aston Martin is not so much a car as an aspiration, a sign that you've made it.
We were the #1 selling dealer in the world for 2015 and 2016, and top 5 for last year.
In the world?
In the world.
OK, so we can be clear here, a lot of well-heeled people walk in through those doors.
Certainly do.
So we know there are extremes of wealth and of poverty. But most of us live somewhere in the middle, and that's probably also what we aim for.
There are loads of ways of analysing wealth. You can look at disposable income, house prices, pensions. You can look at deprivation and consider all the regional variations. And when you put all of that data together, you find a few places that seem to be sweet spots where all the good bits are found in one place. So I've come to one of them, Codsall in Staffordshire, to see if life is as good in reality as it seems to be in a spreadsheet.
This is Steve, the butcher. His shop's been here for decades.
We do have, well, a large range of different types of customers. You know, we have the customers that come in and want a nice treat, so they have a nice piece of fillet steak. And then we've got the customers that would come out just for a couple of pounds of sausage, some mince.
When I said to you that we thought this was a sweet spot, what was your reaction?
I was quite amazed because it's not something that you necessarily think about, but on reflection, it is a lovely place to live, a lovely place to work.
The West Midlands is not our richest region, but it is in places like Codsall where your money goes furthest, which makes it attractive for young families.
Living here means that we can afford a nice house and be able to send it to a private school, whereas if we lived in Harrogate, it would be a choice of one or the other. So definitely, it's an affordable place, it's a family-friendly place.
One of the other things actually about this place is it has quite low inequality.
I'd probably agree with you. I've not seen much poverty. I think everyone's sort of middle class. No, I don't see us leaving until perhaps we retire.
There are no clear answers about being wealthy. Perhaps because we're still wrestling with inequality. Perhaps because that word, wealthy, means different things to different people.
Do you consider yourselves wealthy?
Yes.
Yeah. In what way?
With what we've got together.
I'm living my dream right now, so I'm wealthy in that, but not yet financially. But we're building on that because we have a lot of plans.
No, I'd say we're comfortable.
No, not at all. No.
Yeah. Not because I've got a lot of money though, because I've got a beautiful family, got a lovely lady behind me. You know, I live in a nice place. People think it's poorly deprived. I think it's beautiful.
Well, Well, let's cross live to Birmingham and speak to the chair of the Black Country Asian Business Association, Ninda Johal, and the chair of the Millennium Point Trust, Simon Topman. Thank you both very much for staying with us. Ninda Johal, to you first of all, when you listen to what Theresa May said and when you listen to what Adam was saying there about wealth inequality, how big a factor is it for small businesses in the area that you are?
Well, there's a couple of things. We talked about brownfield sites. We're in the Black Country, from where I'm from. We have lots of brownfield sites which are, if the government gave us the money, we could remediate and turn them into great housing stock. I think in terms of housing is one element of the complete economy. So if we have an economy that's buoyant, we have a workforce that's skilled, then all these things, when they come together, you then have a really prosperous area. For small businesses, they can only operate in an environment where there is prosperity, where people have disposable income. So I think it's quite key we get the bigger picture right. In other words, getting the infrastructure, the skill set, and making sure the right conditions are there for small business to operate, rather than taking a piecemeal approach toward business.
Topham, you're chair of the Millennium Point, which is a science and technology and learning centre. A young, bright spark growing up in Birmingham, someone who's got a really scientific brain. They might be interested in coming along to your location, might they? Do you think that they have the same opportunities as somebody who might be growing up, say, in London with more affluent parents would have?
I certainly do, yes. There's huge opportunities currently, especially with the arrival of things like HS2, which is bringing an incredible number, projected potentially 50,000 new jobs to Birmingham, many of which will be scientific, technological, and offer real opportunities to young people. And it's so much more affordable here in Birmingham. Yes, house prices will always be too high, definitely, if you're young and struggling. But by heavens, it's an awful lot better than it is down south. So I think young people need to think very carefully before they move south and should think about making a success of their lives here. And what is not being addressed, I'm hearing this from nobody, certainly not from the Prime Minister. Housing has become an investment vehicle. It's no longer a case of just providing places for people to live. Here in Birmingham, there are plans for 5,000 homes within the Middle Ring Road. It's not a case of supply and demand putting that right. You'd have to drench the country in housing to allow supply and demand to fix that problem. It's about taking away that incredible rise in prices year on year. The new homes that are built, they won't make things cheaper. Those homes will be sold at the current market price, and the people who buy them won't sell them on unless they too get that price. And unless that is addressed, the housing problem, where young people cannot afford housing, will continue.
Sad stuff. Simon Topham and Ninda Johal, thank you both very much.
Well, joining me now is Jonathan Athau, Deputy National Statistician for Economic Statistics. Many thanks indeed for joining us this afternoon, Jonathan. What do you mean by wealth and how does it vary around the country?
Well, first of all, let me start by saying when we talk about wealth, we're not talking about millions or even billions. We're talking about very large numbers. In total, Britain has wealth of about £13 trillion, 13 million pounds. So that's a very large number. But what we tried to do when we're talking about wealth, to make it a bit more understandable, a bit more, bring it down to the level people will relate to, is look at household wealth. So what does a typical household have by way of wealth? And there we find that typically we're talking £260,000 of wealth per household. Now, what is that wealth? Well, there's a number of different elements to it. Actually, the biggest component of wealth is pensions. So the amount of money that's been saved to you in your pension or you've saved yourself. That's about 40% of all the wealth in Britain. The next largest item is property wealth. That's around a third of total wealth. And then the other elements of wealth are financial wealth, which is money you have in your bank account, things like that, but also then physical assets, physical wealth, things like cars or other assets you own. Those last two categories are around 20%, but property wealth is the largest.
We've used the Gini coefficient for our study. Can you explain to us what that is?
Yes, so the Gini coefficient is a measure of inequality. It ranges between 0 and up to 1, and if there was no inequality, the Gini coefficient would be 0, and if only one person owned all the wealth in the country, it would be 1. So it's a good gauge, internationally used measure of inequality.
Just looking at the figures from our research, 1 in 5 people in London are said to be millionaires. The same figure for the most poorest in our society. Are there any other parts of the country that have a similar pattern?
Well, London is quite extreme. It stands out as having the highest level of inequality in wealth. That is despite not actually being absolutely the richest part of the country. It's only the 3rd richest in terms of household wealth. And when you look at London, what you find is 25% of households in London have £35,000 or less in wealth. And that is quite a low figure. That's comparable to somewhere like the northeast of England, which actually has the lowest household wealth. So you can see that there's quite an extreme at the bottom end in London. And then you also see it at the top. A quarter of households in London have £850,000 of wealth or more. So you can see there's a real spread there between 25% of people who have £35,000 or less and 25% of people in London with £850,000 or more. And as I said, London has the most extreme inequality in wealth.
Jonathan Athal, thank you.
New research for Sky News by the Office for National Statistics has revealed how people's wealth varies across Britain.
Our economics editor, Ed Conway, is at the screen to break it down.
Well, let's start with one of the big issues of our day, inequality. And the most common way of measuring this is something called the Gini coefficient, basically a measure of the gap between rich and poor. 0 equals perfect equality, so down there, and 1 equals total inequality, where one person would own everything. So how do different regions compare when it comes to wealth equality? This chart shows you the story. The higher the bar, the more unequal they are. So, for instance, have a look in the middle here. You've got areas like the southwest, which is most equal. There we are, the southwest, followed by the east of England and the West Midlands, the most equal place on our line. But what about if you break it down by the type of wealth? And for most of us, the biggest asset of all is property. And so this shows you inequality of property wealth alone. And it's a striking difference. In every region, property makes society a lot less equal. Just look at how high those bars are. And particularly, the inequality is extreme in the northeast. You can see that over here, this bar, very high indeed. What about financial wealth, the value of cash and investments? This second line shows you that, and you can see, again, how those regions compare. And now physical wealth, stuff like your car or antiques, those bars shows you physical wealth. What you'll notice here is these lines are a lot lower, so less of a gap between different regions when it comes to the value of their physical possessions or indeed their financial possessions. Finally, and most importantly, the inequality of pensions, private pensions. So one lesson when you look at all of this is that home ownership hasn't levelled the balance, it's actually made this country less equal. And as you can see from this chart showing you London is actually the least equal place in the UK. It might not surprise you all that much, but have a look at just how the wealth is distributed. So first off, 1 in 5 people, this bar over here, 1 in 5 people in London are millionaires. But about the same number are the very poorest in society with wealth of less than £20,000. In fact, that's the highest percentage across any region in the UK. And what's striking here is the shape of the chart, how the majority of people in the capital are at either end, either extreme of this spectrum. Now, you might be assuming London is the wealthiest place in the UK, but actually, in terms of the median or middle household, it's not. On that basis, it's the southeast that takes that triumph. It's the southeast and then the southwest and then London in 3rd place. And the poorest average household in Britain is the northeast.
Ed, thanks very much for that. Well, let's look at this a little further. Joining us now from Birmingham is Sarah Bartlett from the debating group Birmingham Salon and editor of I Choose Birmingham, Tom Cullen. Very kind of you both to join us. Birmingham, the West Midlands and Birmingham are pretty much the most equal place on our line, on line 18. You are both clearly fans of Birmingham. Do you feel that this level of equality, which perhaps some other parts of the UK don't have quite as much as you have, makes a difference to society? I'll send that to Sarah first.
I can't give a bird's eye view of Birmingham. I'm a person who lives in Birmingham and works in Birmingham. I see a city that is good to live in, good to work in. I'm aware that there are inequalities. In my area in which I live, for example, a woman is setting up a child poverty action group because about 48% of children in that neighbourhood are in poverty, and I'm keen to get involved in that.
Well, that's an interesting point, isn't it, Tom, that although Birmingham on paper may look like a more equal place, the West Midlands generally, when you actually break it down within the region itself into particular communities, there can be massive inequality still.
Well, I'm no financial analyst, but in terms of community, I think Birmingham really is one very strong community. I think that's come through many decades of perhaps other cities in the country slinging mud in our direction, and that's kind of galvanised Brummies as one 1 million strong unit in one community. From what I can see, which is very different to London, I lived in London for 13 years, what I can see in Birmingham are companies and people and businesses that are helping each other get that step up. There really appears to be that desire for this city to not only improve but keep on improving on what is about 10 to 15 years of radical advancement in Birmingham.
And Sarah, you talked about one area that's particularly hard hit, but Theresa May's been talking about housing today, and it would seem that it's easier to get on the housing market in Birmingham than lots of other parts of the UK. What do you think that does to community, to have people being able to afford the home in which they live in and actually buy it themselves?
Well, I think it's really important to have that sense of belonging. As Tom says, I do have that sense that Birmingham is a large community in its own right, as well as an accumulation of successful smaller ones. We run the Birmingham Salon, and that has its own community within that, where we're trying to address certain issues, social issues and cultural issues. And I think that the advantage of living in Birmingham is that it offers all the advantages of a big city, but with the feeling that you can really make a difference, which perhaps you don't have a sense of in London.
Absolutely. If I could add to that, if possible. I think I'm a case in point. 13 years in London, I decided to try to get on the property ladder. There was no way it was happening. I was looking at flats I didn't want to live in areas I did, or areas I didn't want to live in and flats I did. And I started to realise, why am I compromising? I looked at Birmingham, I had 2 kids, and I found a home I could afford and made the move.
And Tom, when we talk about community, if Birmingham is more equal than, say, London is, do you think that affects the sense of community? The fact that there are more people in similar situations makes the community stronger?
Absolutely, I do. I really do think there's that sense of it's almost us versus them that's kind of been forced on Brummies because of a history of having perhaps at times fair criticism, but at times wildly unfair criticism directed at this city. And it's a lazy opinion now of Birmingham. It's something that I think we invite people now to come to the city, to visit, or even to live, and to experience exactly the change in Brum.
OK,
There's
Tom
so
Cullen
much
and Sarah
going on
Bartlett.
here now.
Sorry, I'm so sorry, Sarah, we're out of time, but thank you both. You're great cheerleaders for the city. Thanks very much, both of you.
We're joined now by 2 former apprentice candidates, Melody Husseini, founder and CEO of social enterprise Inspire Engage International, and businessman Gary Poulton. Thanks very much, both of you, for joining us. Melody, if I could start with you, I just want to ask you both this question. What does wealth mean to you, Melody?
I mean, for me, looking at it from a social perspective, is it purely pound notes and possessions? Or for us, it's really a wider definition of that. It's values. It's looking at things like how a community is thriving. And I think we must look at it with this wider definition. If we were to strip away all the pounds and possessions and all these things, but they are important to a thriving economy, I know that. But outside of that, are we rich in happiness? Are we rich in skills? Are we rich in aspiration and kindness? And as a social entrepreneur, we think that these things are absolutely crucial to also measure.
Gary, how about you?
Yeah, I think back up what Melody said there. I think it's how you define wealth, really, from a financial point of view. I think property equity is a big part of that, and whilst we continue to include that, I think there are segments of the UK, particularly in the south, where that will only continue to grow. But I think, you know, how you define wealth, does that include other things other than financial? I define myself as wealthy because I've got a great family life and, you know, I enjoy my life at home. But in terms of the financial point of view, if we continue to just focus on pound notes, then I think property equity will continue to widen the gap.
OK, Melody, I want to ask you about a couple of findings in our research. So households in South East England more than double the wealth of those in the North East. You're up there in Birmingham. Is that changing, do you think, or is that going to be entrenched for quite some time?
What is going to be changing, sorry?
In terms of household wealth, South East England having more than double the wealth of those in the North East.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, we are in very uncertain times, and I think at the moment it's very difficult to predict what next year is going to look like or what the weather is even going to look like. So it's very difficult to say what household income exactly is going to look like. But I do think that we are shaped by some of these perhaps softer notions rather than these very hard figures. I mean, I work with young people. I'm a professional speaker. I go and train young people. And we were out there looking at, I work in London as well as other regions and internationally, as well as here in Birmingham where we're based. And we would go and we speak to young people. When we look at here in this region, they seem to think that more things are possible in terms of what they can reach and what they can acquire than perhaps some of the other regions, such as in London, where it seems like the gap is big. And I think that that's really what I worry about, is less about these harsh figures, because you don't know exactly what that means, but the repercussions of it, I think, are absolutely crucial for us to look at. And that's really what worries me about the findings.
Gary?
Yeah, I think, you know, the gap is there, but I think the opportunities now are there more than ever in terms of lower barriers of entry for people to really get wealthy. I think we've got a new brand of entrepreneurs coming through now, and again, lower barriers with social media, and it's easier for people to get out there. People do not need to work on Oxford Street. They can work in remote locations, and, you know, there's, I've seen Tim Andrews from Love Brum was on earlier, and there's charities and support out there that are really going to support these people who probably in the category of less wealthy. So yeah, the gap is potentially getting bigger, but there is a massive opportunity out there for people to close that gap, and I think it's all about mindset and taking that opportunity. Infrastructure example, HS2 coming from Birmingham to London, I think is only going to help things going forward.
In terms of what we're talking about here, you know, you're both, I guess, talking a little bit about young people in your answers, and obviously it's good that you think the picture is changing. One picture, though, that is not changing and probably will not for a long time is household wealth. London and the South East now accounting for 43% of the value of all properties across the UK. So despite what you are both saying, Melody, that's still a massive, massive barrier that young people face that I suppose they just don't think is ever going to happen for them right now.
I think that it is a barrier. I'm absolutely agreeing with that. I think that it is worrying. One thing I would like to say, though, with regards to opportunities, is that here in Birmingham, for example, I mean, you know, Gary was just talking about that, you know, you can create your opportunities, you don't have to be based in Oxford Street and so forth. But the good thing with Birmingham, and this is where the gap, you know, the lack of the gap really helps, is that you can, as an entrepreneur, get some prime location office spaces here, which really helps. So, yes, I do think that young people are the ones shaping some of this, and this is why I think we should focus on that and ensure that their aspirations stay clear. But I do think that there are issues, and I think inequality in a sense is obviously a bad thing, but this isn't about that person's house costs X and my house costs Y. This is an issue of ensuring that we always continue to provide access, no matter what community people come from or what backgrounds people come from or what their household incomes are, to the things that matter, to allow them to create their own opportunities. I haven't necessarily come from a background where everything's been handed to me on a plate, but in spite of that, you can go out and create your opportunities. I think we need to be careful about perhaps placing people in a box to say, you know, you are from a low-income house family and so forth, and what that really means, because then we will really be creating a big problem and a huge gap.
Gary, how big do you think housing is as an issue here?
I think there is a big gap. I think, you know, look at the stats. Housing and affordability of residential and commercial properties in London is significantly higher. But I think there's a lot to be done about awareness and mindset. I think there's a lot of tools out there that can help various generations get on the property ladder and acquire these. I talk about my own experience. You know, 5 years ago, I was in the mindset where I cannot get on the property ladder, I can't afford it. And it actually took my mother-in-law, funny enough, to talk to me about the Help to Buy scheme and lower deposits of 5%. And, you know, that's probably the best decision I ever made 5 years ago. So I think the barriers are there. I think they are increasing, but I think there's a hell of a lot that we can all do in terms of encouraging this awareness and letting people know that there are various tools out there. I mean, there's quite a big mindset in this country that we always have to buy our property. We always have to have a 25, 30-year mortgage, but there are multiple ways of getting hold of that property. There's the old-fashioned rental market, but even on that now, you know, I'm seeing more and more houses of multiple occupancy in key locations that are really, really affordable. So again, I think it's just creating that awareness and lowering the barriers and encouraging people that there are alternative routes out there.
OK, Gary Poulton, Melody Hosseini, thanks very much both for your time this afternoon.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.